Our next one is Steve Bohr. Steve began his 33-year financial services career immediately upon graduation from Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa in 1992. Born and raised on his family farm in Wellman, Iowa, his heritage was deeply engaged in agriculture. In 1993, Steve founded Farm Financial Strategies, FFS, a program to offer strategies to preserve the family farm. Today, FFS has 13 associates and does business in 7 Midwestern states and Arizona. While saving estate shrinkage was the original mission, keeping countless numbers of farms in the rural community has been the driving force behind day-to-day operations. Steve is a founding partner in a firm called Next Gen Ag Advocates, where FFS is positioned to transition operating farms within the family. Next Gen's mission is to match inheriting or retiring landowners with a local producer to operate the farm when there's not a next generation to farm in their own family. He currently writes a popular column on farm transition and succession strategies in the Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri publications. Missouri Farmer Today publications. Steve is active at his church and owns and operates his family farm in southeast Iowa. He is married to his college sweetheart Jennifer, and they are proud parents of Brody and twins Baxter and Ava.
Thank you, Zoe. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. I'm pleased to be here. I will drop some information on you today, but I'd prefer to talk about whatever it is that you guys would want to talk about. So please don't wait till the end to ask questions. Is this going to be okay? I really don't probably need it.
We need it.
Okay. As long as I don't get all kinds of feedback, tell me where I can stand better. So Steve Bohr is my name. I was born in Wellman. I was telling Zoe a little while ago that my dad famously said when he left the hospital after having his 4th daughter that we'll be back. He didn't say thanks to the nurse. I was born to farm. My dad and my uncle farmed in partnership. My uncle beat my dad to the punch though, having 2 sons that were 5 and 6 years older than me. Farming full-time when I graduated college in 1992, and I had to get an off-farm job. I got lucky. I ran into a guy in Cedar Rapids who happened to have a lot of relationships. One of them was with a guy who was the publisher of the Iowa Farmer Today. And there I was, a 22-year-old kid that knew nothing about nothing, and I was giving estate planning workshops for 60-year-olds who are all now long gone. Back then it was about estate tax shrinkage. The federal estate tax exemption was $600,000, and between a married couple, it did not carry over. Today, that same federal estate tax exemption is $13.99 million, and between a married couple, if you don't use it, it carries over, called portability. So the environment in my planning world that I learned was all about shrinkage. As a matter of fact, the guy that hired me, his marketing plan back in the 70s was to hire an aerial photographer, take a picture with serrated scissors, cut it in half, send it in a mail to the farmer with which half are you going to give to the government? You know, that was his marketing plan. And so that environment totally switched. Today, it's all about transition planning. So much so that I started a new company 6 or 7 years ago called Next Gen Ag Advocates that was designed to try to match up people who were not related. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of our transition is within the family. It's forced just because you were born into it. And that usually sometimes doesn't make a great relationship, and we don't communicate very good within the family. But what I have found is our relationships across families work on a greater probability because we actually spend time picking that person out. It's similar to a marriage rather than an arranged marriage within the family. So I'll share a lot of stories. One of the things I was so grateful to be here today, I figured it's been 3 years since I've been to any industry meeting. I am very focused, and Aaron Brenneman just said, shoot, I wrote it down. Where did I write it? He who does it best gets to do more. And I thought, oh man, that's probably, I'll have 900 planning meetings a year with families. And I do that in 165, I call them green days. And I have yellow days, those are days off. I usually have 190 yellow days, even though my farm days are considered yellow. Red days are red tape, I have 10 of those every year. My blue days are blue sky, going to industry meetings, planning, thinking. You know how many I've had of those in the last 3 years? None. This is my first getaway day that I've had to think about, and the whole time I'm kind of in the swine industry. I got a barn, but it's not my livelihood other than, you know, I got a ton of clients who are pig producers. So, you know, a lot of this stuff is not necessarily appealing to me, but it's exciting to me. So, enough about me. This is my dad. Normally I have a handout, but this is a disclaimer that basically says, don't take stuff home and implement it without deliberation and thought from professional advisors who know what's going on. My dad hated corporations, never had one, but had a buddy at coffee shop that he drank coffee with every day that had all of his land in a corp, didn't have any kids to take it over, wound up liquidating the corp, and it cost him about 50% tax to get it out, get the land out of the corp. So therefore my dad thinks all corporations are the devil, right? The moral of the story is coffee shop talk will get you into trouble. And the other picture up here is, or the reason this up here, my son Brody. I caught my dad red-handed taking a 4-year-old fishing when his rules were you couldn't go fishing with grandpa until you're 12 because my dad couldn't swim. And the moral of that story is in today's world, you're gonna have to bend the rules. If you live by the rules in farm transition, it's not happening. You're gonna have to bend those rules and sometimes make your own rules to make it work, because this thing will not transition naturally in cash flow. Farm Financial Strategies was always about planning within the family. Next Gen was about planning across the family. Real quick, big picture. I always talk macroeconomic. We farm because it's handed down to us usually. This picture, my grandfather in 1951 on the old M, the day that it was the new M when he brought it home. Most of us are involved in production agriculture because our parents were before us. And that's a key component in what I'm going to call the perfect storm here. Another reason it's a great place to raise, freedom and independence, sorry. This picture of my dad and my uncle, those two jokers had an opportunity to do something that my generation will not have. They bought farms and paid for them on those farms' own merit. They did not have to subsidize back then. Today, that's not the case. Lastly, it's a great place to raise a family. Look at my little daughter, Ava, right there. She's sitting here today. She's a second-year vet student at Iowa State, and a swine vet as well. So I am so thankful that I was raised with a pitchfork in my hand. Today, kids are raised with one of these in their hands, and that's a big problem. Why would you ever stop? We have something we love to do. It's a historical thing. Why would you stop? You will be forced out, whether it's financial, health, and if those two don't get you, ultimately you're going to die. And it begs the question, what happens then? Shrinkage. We'll talk a little bit about that. Unless you guys have questions, we'll talk more. And then transition planning. We can associate with some of these pictures, you know, we've been there a little bit, some of those dealing with stuff. You guys, what's the company that makes pumping equipment in Southeast Iowa, Washington? Bazooka Farms. They asked me to come in and speak, and they had a conference called Let's Talk Shit, LTS. And so I did this, although I replaced it with stuff. Dealing with family relationship when stuff runs downhill, in family transition, what happens when you're in deep stuff? Again, we can relate to these pictures, but the problem in transition is the lottery concept. This is what we have to deal with the off-farm heirs. There's going to be a large monetary equity inheritance someday, and how do we deal with that in a time when things just will not cash flow? Here's my famous chart on the left, what matters, and then on the right, what you can control. Ultimately, those people that are successful are figure out and spend their time in that middle piece. And when we do a fact finder, we talk about what matters and what you can control, and then we focus first on where that crossover is. Big picture, there's 30 million acres in Iowa. Iowa State University tells us the average is 11,467 from 2024. That's a decrease for the first time in a long time from 2023. That is a 51% increase, though, from 2020, when the average was 75,59. If you do the math, 30 million acres times 11,467,000, that it was, in 2020, $231 billion of market capitalization. In 2023, it had gone to 362. Last year, 350. Are those real numbers? When we're talking about the appraisal value of the land times the number of acres, those aren't real numbers unless one of two things happen. You sell or you die. And I don't know about you guys, but none of my clients want to do either one of those. And so we get so wrapped up on this value and the equity and what's going on, and for most of it's not a real number, at least we don't want it to be, until we either sell it or we die. Begs the question, what age group owns the land? My dad, this picture in 1993, my uncle, myself, and my 2 cousins. In this picture, pictorially, those are the 2 guys that own it. These are the 3 jokers who want to own it. And this is a picture of my sisters and my wife and my mom. This is the group of people I have to deal with, right, in that transition process. Both these groups are different. They look different. They act different. They spend their money different. They do things differently. But it doesn't mean that one group is right or one group is wrong. We just have to figure out how to manage those differences and what it means for your operation. Statistically, 34% of the land is owned by 75 years old and older. That is scary, my friends. In the state of Iowa, there are 99 counties. I just told you there are 30 million acres. If you do the math, that means there's about 300,000 acres in every county in Iowa. 34% of that is about 100,000 acres. Mathematically, that means that there'll be 100,000 acres in each county that transitions in the next 10 to 15 years. We are not ready for that at these land values. 60% is owned by people 65 years and older. That means 2/3 of that ground is going to transition in the next 20 years. 16% is owned by people 55 years and older, or younger, excuse me. That's our future, and they don't own it. Who will own it is the biggest question from a macroeconomics position that we need to ask. That means we might be in deep stuff. Okay, so here's the perfect storm. Age of the landowner, oldest it's ever been in history. We're at all-time high land values, even though we've set back last year. We're still out of a range of subsidization. It requires subsidization and economies of scale to compete, whether you're going to buy more ground or rent more ground or grow your operation. These 2 guys have the required subsidization. They're not number 1 and number 2 landowner in the country anymore. They're like 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. But it begs the question, why do these guys want to own farm ground? Talk about, you need to control the food supply if you're a conspiracy theorist. Every acre of ground that Bill Gates owns is next to rail or water. Of course, then we have China. And I don't need to tell you guys this, but if you look at the picture of the arable land in the world, in China, they have less than 1% of the arable surface area to grow food in the world, but they have more than 11% of the world's population. By definition, they can't grow their own food. We can, right here. We have something that the world wants, and if we don't protect it, we won't own it anymore. I normally go through this, but I'm not going to in today's setting. What this says, and I do have a handout that I'll let you, if you want one, come up and get one at the end. What this basically says is a worksheet to figure out how many acres you own, how many kids you have, what would be the appraised value of that ground. Are you going to give a discount in your estate plan? Are you going to transition while living or at death? And will it cash flow? And the moral of this story, when you start out with $14,000 an acre ground, and you got 400 acres of ground, and you got 4 kids, and one of them's farming, let's say you give them 25% discount in your transition process for whatever reason. You take $14,000 an acre ground and take 25% off of it, and it brings it down to $10,500. You're one of 4 kids, you inherit a fourth of it, that brings it down to $7,800 an acre, let's say. And I always ask people, how many of you would buy ground at $7,800 an acre that would appraise at $14,000 an acre? Y'all would. And then when you do the cash flow to figure out what it's going to cost to borrow the money and pay for it, it's $900 an acre cash flow. How many of you would, sign up for 20 years at $900 an acre to pay for that? Nobody would. That illustrates how far we are upside down in agriculture, because we actually believe that $7,800 an acre is a good deal, and it still won't cash flow. And that is a massive problem in the emotional and the psychology of trying to explain this to farming children who kind of get it until it happens, and then they really get it, and the non-farming children who a lot of times don't ever get it. Consolidation in agriculture is a big problem. I would have never thought that the company that Mary Garsh was involved with, that I knew back in the 70s, would have wound its way to Syngenta, and all these companies are today ChemChina. And I don't have to tell you guys the same story in the livestock industry. This is a picture, obviously, of what consolidation does. Small communities are going away. Schools are going away. Small family farms and just family farms in general are going away. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this social media thing and farm leasing, other than to tell you a quick story. Had a gentleman in Northeast Iowa called me about 5 years ago now, maybe 7, and he said, hey, I found this company on Facebook. They're gonna rent my ground for $321 an acre. This was 2018, I think, for 3 years, cash up front. And you know what he was gonna ask me? Not, who is this? Why are they doing it? Are they gonna take care of my ground? What's it gonna be like at the end of the 3 years? What's this all about? His question, can you get me out of the tax of that? And so this stuff is out there. And I did a dog and pony show for Compeer, and Illinois, everybody had heard of these guys. As a matter of fact, I was in a room of 100 producers, and 45 of they raised their hand, 45 of their landlords had received an identical letter asking to rent their ground out from underneath them under those terms. Wisconsin, nobody had heard of them. Minnesota, nobody had heard of them. Iowa, about 3 out of 100 had heard of them. Why in Illinois? I hypothesize because Illinois allows institutional ownership of farmland. Those other states don't. And this is a company that sold for $1 billion the technology that sends the data up into the cloud, the puck from a combine. And so the hypothesis is they kind of wanted to control the land market and buy land and started in Illinois because they could. So there's a bunch of outsiders that basically want what we have, and again, if you don't protect it, it could go away. Back to the perfect storm. The farm is a legacy asset. French philosopher René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. That's what makes us as humans different. A farmer farms, and that defines him or her, and they're not willing to give that up. Control, difficult to surrender, but required to transfer. Advice from specialists, limited by location, experience, and incentive. My father, 27 years ago, fell off of a roof, hit his head, had baseball-sized blood clot taken out of his brain. The brain surgeon at the time was 60 years old. He was the highest paid individual in the state of Iowa, other than the football coaches and the basketball coaches. I inadvertently insulted him. I asked him how many of these surgeries he'd done. I'd been around enough that I've worked with, not at that time, but today I've worked with over 2,500 attorneys. I can spot quickly if one is a specialist or not very quick. And even at that time, I was asking him. Later, he told me he'd done 10,000 brain surgeries. And so a lot of times we are limited in the advice that we get from local people. And we just assume that they are specialists, or at least they know what they're doing. And to some extent, maybe they do, but a large extent, they don't. Interest rates will change in the future. Longevity of the landowner. This was important. We're creating this sandwich generation because people are living longer. Because most people's transition plans are in their will. By definition, that means they've got to die before it's going to happen. If people would die in their 60s on average, their kids would be in their 40s, that's prime time to take it over. But if people die in their 80s and 90s, that next generation in their 70s, not going to happen. Just got sandwiched out. Graphically, this is what it looks like. Old man makes it to age 50, he's now efficient. This is the area of efficiency, but he's not going to turn it over until he's 80. By then, the son is 50, he never hits it, grandson never hits it. Okay, so grandpa all of a sudden turns it over, skips over the middle generation. At least the grandchild hits it, because the grandchild had a chance to start when they were 25. Here's where the operators do it, and it's hard. When you're 55 and efficient, and you start to turn it over to that 25 or 30-year-old next generation. That is hard to do, my friends, but that's what's going to be required. Otherwise, you're not going to be in this peak efficiency, and it's not going to happen. You'll get booted out by those who can afford to do so. Family dynamics of fair versus equal. I wrote a column once on my experience. I had a day where two families from 2 different states, 2 different situations. One was turkey grower, and he happened to be on the banking board. And he hired his 32-year-old son away from Des Moines in a professional setting, paid him $125,000 salary to come home and manage the farm. He had cash flow. He bought into the farm, he bought other buildings, he bought farms. So by the time he was 45, he was on his way. The very next meeting was from Western Iowa, a large cattle grower. And the son was 57 years old. He'd worked for mom and dad for 32 years, he told me. And he said, never once have mom and dad ever paid me a dime of salary. He had all the meat he could eat. He had a cell phone, a pickup truck. He had a place to live, but he had no equity. He was banking on sweat equity given to him in the future. That family decided to give him, they had a corporation, we put their land in a land LLC. They transferred 32% to the son via gift to represent 1% sweat equity for every year of those 32 years he'd been with them. They basically caught him up. That was equity even with discounts of about $3 million. When we had that family meeting, you can imagine how that went with the non-farming kids. They were looking for their $3 million. And I hypothesized, had they had 32 years ago just started by giving him 1% sweat equity as they went, nobody would have said boo. And so we have to understand the difference between performance-based pay and inheritance-based pay. Fair versus equal is interesting. If you're not in this room, I'm sure. Equal is a science, fair is an art. If you're in this room by any chance, or you know who told me this, I'm searching. A guy once told me in a gruff voice, fair, that's state fair. That's cotton candy and horse poop. That's what fair is. And there's a lot of people that take that attitude. The best one, though, by far, John Dutton, Yellowstone. In one of the late fifth season episodes, the grandson, step-grandson, said to John Dutton, it wasn't fair that the government took the land away from the Indians. And John Dutton said in his gruff voice, fair means one side got exactly what they wanted in a way the other side can't complain about. And I thought, I couldn't reach for the remote to pause the TV fast enough to write that down. That right there is the Holy Grail. You have to figure out what fair is, and you have to make it in a way that your kids believe that that's fair, in a way that they can't complain about. You need to decide what fair is and divide it equally. Number 10, farming is hard. Each generation produces fewer farmers. Tax law uncertainty, estate income, capital gains, and basis. You need to understand basis. Basis is what you paid for property. Let's say a piece of farm ground, you buy it for $1,000 an acre. Today it's worth $14,000. There's capital gains in there. At death, you get a basis adjustment up to the fair market value. I believe that stepped up basis harms agriculture more than it helps. That's a bold statement, and if you were a group of attorneys, I would never say that. By the way, are there any attorneys in here? Certainly no accountants, right? I'd get shunned or stoned. But the bottom line is, one of the biggest byproducts of basis is farms get sold. Almost every auction that you go to, there's one common denominator, somebody died. And that means they got a basis step up. And that means there's no tax to sell it. And if there was not a plan, I'm totally okay with you selling your ground, if that's your goal. But if your goal is to keep the ground for whatever reason, basis step up might wind up harming you more than it hurts. It also is an argument or a reason for the attorney or the accountant to say, well, don't do anything until you die. You get a basis step up. When maximum arguments and disagreements happen, along the way maybe nursing home or other issues have happened, right? And then probate also happens on the backside. So you have to be careful about just waiting around for the almighty basis step up. Now, where basis step up is fantastic, how about buildings? I'm in a group of hog producers. You guys got all kinds of depreciation, but guess what? You've used it. At your death, reload it. Your spouse or your kids get to redepreciate it all over again. Fantastic. Same thing with tile, fence. You guys don't have any fences. Fertility, that's a big one right now. And in your world, you have a ton of fertility. We grid sample, we put a value on it. It depends. You can go really aggressive, you can go conservative. I could do a whole workshop on that too. But those things are unbelievable if you can redepreciate it, and allows us to do a lot of things at the next generation. The death tax credit, 2024, 13.6 was the exemption. If you go over it, it's 40%. Right now, it's 13.99. Next year, where'd it go? It's scheduled to go to 5 million. With inflation, it'll be about 7.25. The big, beautiful bill has 15 million permanent exemption in it. So at this point in time, it's going to boil down to whether that passes or not. If it passes, we're at 15 million. If it doesn't pass, we're back to 7.25. Estimate, the inflation number hasn't come out yet. With a 40% tax if you go over. So we have to keep one eye on this, even though most of us aren't real concerned about it, but we do have to keep an eye on it because of that 40% number. Deferral mentality makes us susceptible to emotional decision making. Greed, hope, and fear, right? We all live in this cycle. We also live in this cycle in transition planning. I have one new widow a week who comes to my office. It's a game. On Sunday night, I look through my schedule. Oh, there's the widow. And I already know what she's coming in to talk to me about. Nursing home, because what's happened is her husband's passed away, left her the farm. She's afraid she's going to lose it now. And then the second thing is her kids are arguing, and she's in a tug of war. And almost 100% of the time, that's what she's coming to talk about. And it's somewhat sad, but it's the way it is. Here's what we're after. 12 rows at a time, probably $500,000 of equipment going through the field. Here's what we're up against. 60 rows at a time, maybe $6 million of equipment going through the field. Comments or questions? How am I doing on time? I'm blowing stuff at you. I want to give you some examples. Okay. Does anybody want to ask any questions? Otherwise, I'll give you some more stuff with some examples.
With that 30.6 million acres, is that tillable acres?
Yes.
Or does that include?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. Tillable and pasture.
And pasture.
Yep. Any others? Perfect. 5 W's of succession. Decide the who. Who are the decision makers? Who are the peacemakers? Who are the troublemakers? Identify the what. Short and intermediate term assets, those transition different. Taxation is different. The timing is different. And then land assets, long-term assets, real estate, those transfer differently. They're taxed differently. Identify the when. Are we going to transition this at death? If so, a will or a trust. Are we going to transition while living? Sale contracts, gifting, corporations or LLC agreements. Talk real quick about sale contracts. It's a lost art. Most of the older generation have bought a farm on a sale contract. None of the younger generation have. Mainly because of greed. The instant if I'm going to sell a farm, I want the money now. I'm going to do something with it. So we talk a lot about parents who want to transition a farm to the next generation on sale contracts. Had an 83-year-old from Benton, Iowa, Benton County, I should say. Maybe it wasn't Benton, Iowa. But Benton County, 9 kids, 2 boys, both of them wanted to farm. For 4 years in a row, he told me he went to his attorney at his income tax appointment and asked him to transfer the farm to the sons. And the attorney told him 2 things. Number 1, you'll get killed in capital gains. Number 2, the boys can't afford to buy it. And when he came to me, I just kind of shook my head and I said, well, where there's a will, there's a way. And with the gifting exemption, I forgot to tell you this, that $13.99 million, you can gift that away while you're living. It's called the unified credit. You can either use it at your death or you can use it while living. Most people think about, I'm not going to write a check to my kids for $13.99 million. No, but you might sell a farm that appraises at $18,000 an acre for $7,000 an acre. That's a gift. And you just use up some of the exemption. And as long as you're under the $13.99 million, there's no harm, no foul. You just got to file a form. And so that's what we did in this particular case. He actually sold the farm to his sons on a contract for $4,000 an acre. And the difference was a gift. We made it affordable. As a matter of fact, we came up with $4,000 an acre because we took the interest rate and the number of years that he wanted him to pay it on a contract, and we backed into the payment. And he told me what the payment he wanted to be. He wanted to be $295 an acre. So we just backed into it and then made the gift the difference. We made it affordable. The second one, capital gains. Of course, capital gains would have killed him if they wrote a check for $14,000 an acre on 400 acres, and the guy had averaged, had a basis of maybe $1,500 an acre. But that's not what we were talking about. We were going to sell it on $4,000 an acre, which that doesn't trigger capital gains, and he had a basis of $1,500. So we did have some capital gains, but when he stretched it on a contract, you only have to recognize the capital gains the year in which you received the payments. So you're stretching the tax over a period of time. He was in a magical tax bracket at the time, about $78,000. Today it's $96,000 is the magical tax bracket. And you all should remember this if you're married, $96,000. That is where the capital gains rate is. What rate? Does anybody know? 0, exactly. So, and he was under that bracket. So he says to me, he goes, you mean to tell me I can price this farm at whatever I want, make it affordable, and not only is it not going to trigger a lot of tax for me, it's actually going to save me property tax, maintenance and expense, it's going to accomplish my goal, and the capital gains rate for me is going to be 0? And I said, yeah, the state of Iowa also taxes it at 0% as well. He starts to cry. And so those are the things, and one of the things that hit me really hard today was when the Sergeant Major talked about defending your address, right? And that's what we need to do. And I start thinking about that. And yesterday I had a meeting with a family in Wisconsin, and it clicked to me right away. Defending it as addressed, that's what they were trying to do in that meeting. It absolutely would not cash flow. No chance whatsoever. And I was going through this, and I told the mom she was going in for heart surgery on July the 11th. And her husband had just died within the last year. So she was getting real serious about it. And she thanked me for having the passion to want to save their farm as much as she wanted to. And I thought about that when Sergeant Major said that. I was like, well, that's kind of what I have become. I'm more interested in saving your address sometimes than you actually are yourself. And somebody's got to be talking this game, or we run a lot of risks here in agriculture. Okay, communicate the where and the why. That why is really, really important. Sergeant Major mentioned that too. Are you going to do it in a business meeting, which I highly recommend? Are you going to do it through rumors and conjecture? Your kids find out from other people, right? Or are you going to do it at the reading of the will? The absolute worst. Do not expect your kids to find out about the plan at the reading of the will. Emotions are high. You've just lost parents. There's only one reason to go in and have a reading of the will. What is it? To find out what I got. Why would you not expect that to not go well, right? So my goal is to have the reading of the will 4 to 5 times with a family before mom and dad dies. That way, when they actually have the reading of the will, nobody shows up. That is estate planning managerial efficiency. If you can communicate it so well that when the time actually comes, everybody already knows, that's the family that won't have, or maybe will have less arguments, if you will. The last one, take action. Figure out how to navigate through the perfect storm. I graduated from Mid-Prairie High School, and Coach Showalter always showed this to us, and I didn't pay any attention to it until I saw this. This is the pyramid of success for John Wooden. This is our pyramid of success at the farm, right? And where are you at in that pyramid? And then when this one flies away, the others finally get a chance. And at that point in time, what's the economics of it's going to be? What's the cash flow of it going to be? How old are you going to be? What is the emotion that's going on? And that's your opportunity to take that and run with it ahead of time rather than in the end. 2 quick things. Give me the hook whenever you're ready. 2 quick things. Number 1, special use valuation. Just wrote a column last week about this. 2009, we got our first auto steer tractor. My dad was grumbling, I can drive that thing better than, it can drive on satellites. We had WAS shifts with the clouds, of course, and the earth shifts. So it wasn't perfectly accurate. Then later, when RTK came out, we had a stationary point that we could triangulate the satellites off of, and it became much more accurate, right? So in the world of transition planning and land valuation, I liken WAS to an appraisal. Lots of variations going on, right? And that's the appraisal method, which is fine. I liken RTK to special use. Special use is a formula that the government has to value farmland strictly based on cash flow. The formula is 5 years average cash rent. In this example, I'm using $300 an acre after property tax, divided by interest rate. Right now, that interest rate's 5.27%. That ground, the 5-year average rent for $300 after property tax is worth $5,692 an acre. Now, you guys are going to say, well, Steve, that land's worth $15,000 an acre. Which market are you in? If you're in the open market, auction, yep. But if you're in the family market and you're trying to find a number that cash flows, that's what it is. And I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong. I'm saying you need to understand both points and figure out what's right for you and what's important for you. The other one are LLCs. This one has taken kind of the market by storm. You can put your land in LLC, I call it the Swiss Army knife. It can do almost anything. Shared acres with rules is really important. Discounting is really important. Offering lease options, make sure you spell out how you're going to come up with that lease. Iowa State Extension average for 28 years, we've used it religiously. But the last 3 to 4, it's not kind of been as in line with the market. So maybe you're going to do a flex lease. Maybe you're going to do a crop share. We have to talk about all that stuff. And what's magical about this thing, you can have a family meeting, thank you. You can have a family meeting and discuss it ahead of time. And how cool is it if while the patriarch and matriarch are living for 10 years, we share with all of the kids what the rent is that they're paying themselves when it doesn't matter. Dad maybe is farming the ground, paying his own LLC rent, which is a deduction on your Schedule F, by the way. That's the way to manage your self-employment tax. It's fantastic. And you communicate that with the kids. That way, when it actually happens and they become a landowner, they've been involved and they understand this stuff and everybody knows what's going on. The LLC gives us a chance to do that. Discounting is a big thing. We've discounted these. The biggest discount I ever got on an LLC with the IRS approved was 44% off the beginning appraised value of the land. Very common between 25 and 30% discount. Lack of marketability, lack of control, minority interest of shares of units. Shift schedule from Schedule F to Schedule E. Comments on that? I feel like those two things I want to spend a little time, and actually I'll probably just shut it down if I only got a couple minutes for questions. Those are just two examples, and I don't have enough time to go through any more examples, but two examples of some strategies I think you guys should at least be aware of, if not try to implement.
Do we have questions for Steve?
Come on, somebody's got something.
I was going to say, I got some for you.
I see a lot of our friends and neighbors who own land transitioning it and putting it in a living trust.
Yes.
What can you tell me about that? Is it about this lifetime exclusion?
Interesting. No, not really. A living trust does one thing and one thing only, avoids probate. A will is inexpensive to set up. It is easy. It guarantees results, but it also goes through probate. Time delay, expense. Maybe the worst thing about probate is publicity. I just had recently a family come, and I never knew their father. He had died 7 years previously. He left a farm to the daughter, left a farm to the son. The daughter's farm, he put a stipulation that she couldn't sell it for 7 years. And if she did, at the end of 7, she had to get a right of first refusal to her brother. The neighbor went to the courthouse and read the guy's will. It was a roadmap. On the 7th year, he ex-dated the calendar. He called the daughter up. He offered her $21,000 an acre, assuming that 160 acres times 21,000, 3.2 million. He was hoping that the son wouldn't be able to afford to borrow 3.2 million on the two farms together, and he was right, and he wound up getting it. So the publicity of probate in that example was a roadmap for the neighbor to give an offer on the farm at the right time, at the right situation. A revocable trust, a living trust, a little more expensive to set up, a little more of a hassle because you got to transfer your assets in, but at death, there is no probate. That's the only thing a revocable trust does. Now, they might put a bunch of language in there about farm transition, but I get this question a lot. Steve, what's the difference between an LLC, which is a management tool, and a trust, which is a distribution tool? When the distribution tool does its job, it's over. The management tool will live on. We usually recommend a very high supermajority vote to make changes or to collapse, sometimes even 100%. So all the kids have to agree if you're going to change the rules. So you can put all that language in a trust, but the problem is for it to stay long-term, the asset has to stay in trust. And now the next generation doesn't have it, they can't use it, they can't control it because it's in this trust. So there's two very different strategies. But as a general rule, a living trust or revocable trust, just avoid probate.
We have time for about one more question. Okay, Gene?
I'll just speak to it. So Steve wasn't looking for this, but I'll just tell you, my family's been working with Steve for 15 years now, Steve, probably putting this together.
At least 12.
Say, invaluable. You gotta, if there's any thoughts around family transition, we're going into that family transition stage now. Steve just helps you do it all. Clearly the best that I've ever run into. And my dad met him in Arizona and got it all started by hearing him in a meeting in Arizona, but it was the best thing our family ever did. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I
just a
appreciate
plug
that,
for
Gene.
Steve.
Unnecessary, but thank you.
Steve, again, I like Gene. Our family's worked with you as well, and I've known you forever. But anyway, how do you deal with a situation where the parents' kind of vision on where they want the farm to go in the future, and the kids may be different, and the parents want to kind of dictate the long-term future after they're gone? And this has been a big one for our family, very big. And there's no easy answers to that. But what do you see working with? Because I know you're in a situation where you're dealing with two different types of people, two different livelihoods. How do you navigate through that to find out what's best for the family overall?
Yep. There's no right or wrong answer to that, Gary, unfortunately. You get on the horse and ride. You have meetings and discuss it. Communication. Hopefully that's done at a time when mom and dad are of, I want to say sound mind, but I don't even mean that. I mean spectacular mind, so they can make decisions if they see, hey, this is maybe not going to work out very well. The best thing you can do is practice and communicate. I think about the Super Bowl and some of the things that I've seen in the Super Bowl recently. That's the grandest of all stages. You don't see coaches drawing up plays in the dirt at the Super Bowl, right? They've prepared. And I think that's the biggest thing that we don't do as farmers, whether it's because we're busy, we want to bury our head in the sand, we don't want to talk about it, it's uncomfortable, right? Talk about uncomfortable. Have a family meeting and talk about this stuff ahead of time. And also, by the way, I prefer that you bring your spouses with you, because they're there whether they're there or not. If the quality of my family meeting is dependent upon the ability of a child to go home and tell their spouse what just happened, and then be able to field questions and not turn that into a dust storm, and so you practice. And some families are willing to do that, others aren't for whatever reason. But no question, the best way is to communicate and practice it. See it for yourself.
All right, let's give Steve a round of applause. Thank him for his time.
Thank you, Zoe. Appreciate it.